Starting in iOS 5, Apple began offering Twitter integration. Users can add multiple accounts to their phones, and any app can actually access these accounts. You can pre-populate and allow users to edit the tweets, or you can use accounts to directly access the Twitter API. However, if you're going to use the Twitter API with these accounts, the user must give their permission. As we just mentioned, before you can use their Twitter account to access the low-level API, the user must opt in. They're going to be presented with a UI alert view that looks a lot like the grant access to the location dialog when you're requesting the user's location. If you try and send a tweet but the user hasn't added an account to their phone yet, they're going to see a dialog that looks a lot like this. They can either cancel out of this or hit Settings and they can add an account there. Clicking on the Settings button takes the user to this screen in their setup. Here they can add an existing Twitter account, or there's even a button to create a new account. Remember, every time that you try to send a tweet and they don't have an account set up, iOS is going to prompt the users with this same dialog. So be sure not to bombard your user with these requests. Use your application settings to determine if you've already prompted the user to add a Twitter account. Also be sure to check the Can Send Tweet of the TW Tweet Compose View Controller. This is going to return true if the network connection is available and an account has been established. Apple has given developers two different options for utilizing the Twitter accounts that have been added to the user's device. First, there's the TW Tweet Compose View Controller. This is a high-level controller. You're not going to be able to do much with this, much like the other native controllers like Mail and the SMS controller. Then there's also the TW Request, and this is going to offer the low-level access to the Twitter API that's going to allow you to use this user's account in place of doing your own OAuth. The TW Tweet Compose View Controller is the primary way that most apps are going to integrate with Twitter. iOS takes care of handling all of the user interface, and iOS also handles all of the underlying communications with Twitter. It's more like a set it and forget it kind of way of handling tweets. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do with the TW Tweet Compose View Controller. You can pre-populate text via the setInitialString method. This will not allow more than 140 characters. You can also use the addImage method, passing in a UI image, to add an image to the tweet. This method is going to return a true if the image was successfully added. You can also add a URL via the addURL method. Again, this is going to return true if you successfully added the URL to the tweet. The 140 character limit also includes URLs, images, and the text. So remember this when you initially set the text. Also, you can only set the content before the creation of this view controller. You cannot make any modifications to it after this has been displayed to the user. The user will then be responsible for actually sending the tweet or disregarding it. So what does this actually look like? The text is added to an index card graphic. The URLs and images are pinned underneath the paperclip. User has the option to add their location to the tweet, and it ends up looking something like this. So since you don't have much control after you present the TW Tweet Compose View Controller, how do you end up knowing if the user hit send or if they hit cancel? Well, the TW Tweet Compose View Controller has an event called setCompletionHandler, and it has a parameter TW Tweet Compose View Controller Result. This will return canceled if the user cancels, and it will return done if the user has hit send. iOS doesn't report back to your app if the tweet fails or not. All iOS is going to let you know is if done or cancel was hit. However, iOS does tell the user if the tweet failed. They're presented with an option where they can cancel or they can try again. Let's go take a look at TW Tweet Compose View Controller in code. Okay, so let's check out the TW Tweet Compose View Controller. I've started a new project here in MonoDevelop. I've added an instance a reference to the monotouch.dialog to help along with some of the UI work that we're going to do. So let's add some class level variables. First, I'm going to grab a dialog view controller, and that's going to hold our UI, and then a TW tweet compose view controller so that we can actually show the tweets. I'm going to make use of a helper function here, make menu, and it's actually going to return a dialog view controller with a root element that just makes some menu items for us to make this a little easier. As you can see, I create a root element called Twitter with monotouch. I create a new empty section there, and then I add a string element TW tweet compose view controller that's going to call our function show tweet compose view controller. And then of course pass our root to the dialog view controller and then return our dialog view controller. Let's do the rest of the UI creation here in the finish launching. As you can see, I set an instance of a dialog view controller to our make menu function that we just created, and then I pass in that controller to the UI navigation controller and set that navigation controller to our Windows root view controller. The last piece of code that we actually have here is our function show tweet compose view controller. And this is what is actually going to show the tweet view controller to the user. First, we new up an instance of the TW tweet compose view controller. Then we try to set the initial text. As I mentioned before, this returns a Boolean value if the text was properly set. So let's just do a little testing here to see if the text was successfully set. In the next section, we add an image. We just use the UIImage.fromFile method to pass in an image that we have added to our project. Remember, all images must be set to content, and we should copy it to the output directory. We also test to see if this was successful. If not, let's just write to the console to let the user know, or to let us know. Then let's add a URL. We have to pass in an NS URL, and we're going to use the from string method to just create it from a normal string. We want to know if the user hit send or hit cancel, so we must implement the set completion handler. We have a delegate that has a property of the TW tweet compose view controller result. That way we can test if it was .canceled or .done. If the user hits cancel, let's write it out to the console. If it hits sent, let's write it out to the console as well. After the user is done, either canceling or sending, we need to dismiss this modal view controller. And now we're going to use our dialog view controller to present the TW tweet compose view controller as a modal. So that's it for using the TW tweet compose view controller. Let's see what it looks like in the simulator. So you can see here's our header and here's our button. Clicking this button, it brings up our tweet, but also we haven't set up a Twitter account. So we're now presented with the option to either cancel or go to settings. Let's go to settings and set one up. We click sign in and it's going to verify our Twitter account. Now, iOS won't return back to the application, so the user will have to relaunch your application if they haven't yet set up a Twitter account. Let's relaunch our demo. This time when we click, we're presented with the same TW Tweet Compose View Controller, but it doesn't alert us that we don't have an account this time. You can see our image and our URL are under this pin, and here's our text. We can also add our location if we want. Now we can hit send. And as you see down in the console, it says that the tweet was sent. That's it for TW Tweet Compose View Controller.